My son-in-law did not ask me anything on that Tuesday evening in March, he told me. His parents needed a place to stay, and I had 3 bedrooms and lived alone. And as far as he was concerned, that was the arithmetic settled. He said it the way you announce the weather. Then he said the other thing, the sentence that changed everything that came after. And honestly, if the arrangement doesn't suit you, Dana and I have been talking about options for your situation anyway. I didn't argue. I have never once won anything by raising my voice, and I am 63 years old and I understand that by now. What I did instead, starting that same night, is the part my family has not stopped being angry about. My name is Yvonne. I live in a 2-story end-unit townhouse at the south end of Meaford, a town of about 12,000 people on the eastern shore of Georgian Bay in Ontario. The house is not large. 1,300 square feet, 3 bedrooms, a narrow backyard that ends at a cedar hedge I planted myself in 2009, and a kitchen window that looks across the water toward the blue smudge of the escarpment on clear mornings. I have lived there since 2006, 18 years. I paid for it month by month, and not one person in my family ever asked me how I came to own it. They only started having opinions about it when they decided someone else should be sleeping in it. I need to tell you how I got that house, because everything that happened in June happened because of what I signed in November of 2006, and I need to tell you who I was when I signed it, because that matters too. I worked as a paralegal for 22 years at a small firm in Owen Sound. Wills, real estate, the occasional estate dispute. Before that, 6 years doing administrative work for the county. My husband Bernard was a millwright at a manufacturing plant outside of Collingwood. We had our daughter Dana in 1987. Bernard died of pancreatic cancer in the winter of 2017. He was 59 years old. I have spent 7 years learning to cook for one person, and I am still not good at it. In 2006, I qualified for membership in the Bayside Housing Cooperative. Nonprofit, 42 units, a volunteer board, and a set of bylaws that govern who may live there, who may join, and under what conditions a member may add another person to their household. I qualified because I worked in the region. My income fell within the co-op's eligibility range at the time, and I passed the standard reference and interview process. I paid a membership share of $4,200 up front and took on a monthly housing charge that has been my only significant expense ever since. What made me eligible to sit at that counter was 22 years of reading documents other people found confusing and finding the lines that mattered. When I joined the co-op, the board asked me within 8 months if I would volunteer as the membership administrator. I did that for 11 years, alongside my work at the firm. I processed applications. I explained Article 14 of the bylaws, the household composition article, to incoming members, to current members wanting to add a partner or an aging parent, to members whose situations had changed. I have read that article so many times I could recite the key sections while standing at a stove. Nobody in my family ever asked about the co-op. They knew I lived in a townhouse in Meaford and that I had some kind of arrangement. My son-in-law, Craig, who owns a landscaping company out of Collingwood and is genuinely excellent at what he does, his drainage work especially, has always believed that paper-based processes exist to slow down sensible people, making sensible decisions. We have not been easy with each other since 2018. When I told him a subcontracting agreement he was excited about had a liability clause that would expose him if a crew member was injured on a residential site. He thanked me the way you thank someone for pointing out traffic. He eventually took it to a lawyer. He has never mentioned that I was right first. Dana is 37. She manages scheduling at a physiotherapy clinic in Collingwood and is better at calming frightened people than anyone I have ever known. She calls me every Sunday at 6. The calls last 11 or 12 minutes. They have lasted 11 or 12 minutes for 4 years, which tells you something about what we have and have not said to each other in that time. Craig's parents are Earl and Margo. Earl is 74. He spent 30 years as a heavy equipment operator on road construction projects out of Barrie and has the back to prove it. Margo worked the cash at a grocery store in Barrie for 21 years. They ordinary people. They are not careless people. What happened to them does something extraordinary when the housing market does something extraordinary. And nobody slows down to read the terms. In 2022, they sold their house on Livingstone Street in Barrie for $480,000. Everybody told them they were brilliant. They bought a 32-foot fifth wheel, spent 2 winters in Florida as snowbirds. Sarasota, first, then further south, handed a significant portion to Craig's younger brother for what turned out to be a pressure washing franchise that lasted 14 months and covered Earl's hip surgery costs that provincial coverage only partly addressed. By early 2026, they had the trailer parked at a site in Innisfil at $720 a month, a 2019 Silverado that needed new brakes, and CPP and OAS between them of roughly $2,400 a month. Dana told me this in February carefully. The way she delivers information, she knows I'm going to think about afterward. I did feel sorry for them. I want to be honest about that, because this story goes wrong if I pretend I did. I lay awake more than once doing the arithmetic on their behalf, looking for some configuration of options that would land them somewhere with their dignity intact. I even looked briefly at whether there was a seniors co-op with a vacancy in the Barrie area. There wasn't, not with a short wait list. That is where everything went sideways, not because of a villain. Because I let people watch me feel sorry. And feeling sorry in the presence of certain families is the same as raising your hand to volunteer. Tuesday, the 11th of March, 7:15 in the evening. I was at the kitchen table with a half-finished crossword and a cup of tea that had gone cold. Craig had Dana on the same call. I could tell from the small echo behind his voice. "So we've been thinking about the situation with Mom and Dad," he said. "Not my mom and dad. Just Mom and Dad, as though we shared them. You've got 3 bedrooms up there and you're on your own. It makes sense." I said that was a fairly large thing to arrive at without a conversation. "There's not much to talk about, Yvonne. The math is straightforward. They can't keep up with the site fees come summer, and you've got space." I said I would need to look at some things before anyone decided anything. He laughed. Not at me exactly. The way a man laughs at a delay he considers unnecessary. It's not complicated. They're family. Then he said the other thing. Options for my situation. I am 63 years old. I walk 5 kilometers 4 mornings a week. I do my own taxes. And last fall I replaced the weather stripping on every exterior door in the house because I watched a video online and then I did it. But he said my situation, and I heard the shape of what he meant inside it. I said, "Let me look at something," he said. "Fine. The way you say fine when you've already decided it's settled." I hung up and stood in my kitchen with the cold tea and listened to Georgian Bay doing nothing in particular because it was a Tuesday in March and everything out there was simply being what it always is. Dana drove up the following Saturday. She brought a coffee from the Tim's on the highway and a bag of the dark chocolate almonds I like, which meant she had thought about this enough to bring provisions. She sat across from me with her coat still buttoned, which is what she does when she's not planning to stay until the conversation is finished. It would just be temporary, she said, until they get sorted. I asked what sorted meant. She turned her cup in slow circles on my table. "Craig's already told them you're open to it." She slid a folded paper across to me. Margo's handwriting. Things she would need in the guest room. A proper bed frame, a closet rod that didn't bow under the weight of winter coats, a full-length mirror because she'd been without one for 8 months. Someone had already chosen which room was hers. I folded the list and put it under the sugar bowl. I told Dana I'd look into some things and get back to her. She was in her car in under 4 minutes, which is a personal record. She did not ask me a single question about how my house worked. She already knew. I could see it in the way she did not quite meet my eyes when she mentioned the guest room. That Sunday evening, I went to the filing cabinet in my office. The folder I was looking for is green. I colored the tab with a marker in 2007 because I possessed the Bayside Housing Cooperative Membership Agreement. 31 pages. I put it on the kitchen table, turned on the lamp, and read it front to back the way you read any document worth reading. Once straight through without stopping, then again with a pencil. Article 14 is the household composition article. Section 14.3 addresses adding occupants. A member wishing to add a permanent resident must submit a household change form to the board no fewer than 30 days prior to the proposed change. The proposed new resident must demonstrate one of the following: employment within Gray County or Simcoe County of not fewer than 20 hours per week, or eligibility under the Co-op's Seniors Residency Supplement, which requires the proposed resident to have maintained continuous primary residence within Gray County or Simcoe County for not fewer than 5 years, immediately prior to the application. Earl and Margo had lived in Barry their whole adult lives. Barry is in Simcoe County. That looked promising for about half a second until I read the next requirement. The member must have been a co-op member in good standing for not fewer than 3 years prior to the application. I had been a member for 18 years. That part was fine. But Earl and Margo had sold the Livingstone Street house in May of 2022 and had been living in the fifth wheel at the Innisfil site ever since. I read Section 14.5, which specifies that the board may request documentation of a proposed resident's primary residence history, and that temporary or recreational accommodation does not constitute primary residence for the purposes of the article. A trailer park you move into after selling your permanent home is not the same as living in a county for 5 years. I wrote that on the legal pad I keep beside the folder. Then I wrote 2 more words beneath it. Apply anyway. That is the part I need you to understand before anything else. I did not file that form to protect myself from Earl and Margo. I filed it to give my daughter something she could put in front of her husband. A piece of paper with a board's signature on it that said no, rather than just her mother's voice saying it over the phone. I went to the Bayside Co-op office on a Friday morning in April. The office is on the main floor of the building nearest the parking lot and still smells the way it did when I worked in that chair 11 years ago. Old carpet and someone's burnt coffee from the shared kitchen next door. The membership administrator is a woman in her late 20s, organized, good at explaining things without being condescending, which is rarer than you'd think. I filled out the household change form at the counter with her pen, both proposed residents, Earl's full name and date of birth, Margo's, relationship to member, parents of member's son-in-law, current address, a campground site in Innisfil, prior permanent address, Livingstone Street, Barry, vacated May 2022. There was a box asking for the reason for the request. 4 lines. I used all 4. I wrote that they had sold their home, that their income was CPP and OAS, that they were connected to me through my daughter's marriage, and that I was asking honestly whether they could qualify. She read it over without expression and told me 21 business days for a determination. I drove home understanding that I had just put my own name in a file that could work for me or against me. That is a thing I spent 22 years learning. Once it's documented, it works both directions. Dana called that Sunday 2 hours early. Mom. Her voice doing the particular thing it does when she already knows the answer, but is hoping I'll offer something different. Margo says, "You filed paperwork on them." I said I filed paperwork for them, and I explained the difference slowly. She said, "You went to the board." I said I asked them a question and they would answer it in 3 weeks. Then she said, "You know what's in Article 14? You helped write the revision in 2012. She was right. 11 years ago, when the board updated the bylaws, they asked me, as the membership administrator, to help draft clearer language for the household composition sections. I sat at a table with the board chair and a lawyer, and we went through the article clause by clause. I suggested the wording that became Section 14.3's Seniors Supplement provision. I wrote it to give aging parents a realistic path to join their adult children in the co-op, because I had watched 2 good members have to make heartbreaking choices when their parents needed care, and there was no legal way to bring them in. Dana knew about the article because in the fall of 2023, I had hip surgery. Non-weight bearing for 6 weeks, then limited for 4 more. Dana came up for 2 of those weeks. The co-op requires an annual household verification. 1 page, signed under Statement of Truthfulness, confirming the unit is your primary residence and listing every person living there. Mine was due in October. Dana sat at this table and filled it out for me, reading each section aloud so I could confirm the answers. She read Article 14, in this room, in her own voice. "You've known since October 2023, I said. A silence long enough that I heard her dog shift on a hard floor somewhere. Then, he would have said it's just a technicality. 2 people, different conversations, the same dismissal. My daughter had been standing between her husband and a piece of paper for 2.5 years, not showing either of them. I didn't raise my voice. I asked her why she hadn't told me. She hadn't told him. Because it would have turned into a fight about you, she said. Not about his parents. About you. She was probably right about that. I told her we'd talk properly once the board wrote back, and she said, okay, in the voice of someone who will not sleep well. I want to tell you what I did with the 3 weeks while I waited for that letter, because it is the part that confuses people most, and I think it is also the most important part. I went into the guest room with a tape measure, 10 feet by 11.4, a closet with a good rod and 2 shelves. The window that faces the cedar hedge and gets morning light from the east. I call it the yellow room because in 2010, I painted it a color called buttercream, and Dana, who was 23 and holding the roller, said it looked like a kitchen from 1987. My mother's quilt is on that bed. She made it in the winter of 1974 in an apartment in Thunder Bay with the radio playing. I sat on the edge of that bed with the tape measure across my knees and thought about Bernard, who would have handled this whole situation in 1 conversation and 9 minutes flat. He was a talker. I am not. I stripped the bed and washed everything on a warm cycle and hung it on the backyard line because the room had the closed-up smell of a place nobody sleeps in. I moved the boxes I'd been storing in the closet out to the garage. At the home decor shop on the main street, I found a reading lamp, small, adjustable neck, $40, because Margo's list had said she liked to read in bed and the overhead light in the yellow room is not good for that. I set it on the nightseat stand and plugged it in and turned it on once to make sure the switch worked. Then I sat in the corner chair and waited. I might have been wrong. In 22 years of paralegal work, I was wrong 9 times that I can name, and every single one of those times I had been so certain going in that I stopped reading at page 2. So I bought the lamp. I made the bed. I thought about which wall would fit Earl's larger luggage bags against it best, and I moved the nightstand to that side. The board's letter came on a Wednesday, 20 days in. I opened it, standing at the kitchen counter. After review of the submitted documentation, the application is denied. Basis: the proposed resident's primary residence since May 2022 has been a recreational vehicle site, which does not meet the definition of primary residence under the bylaws. Neither the employment criterion nor the senior's residency supplement applies. The letter reminded me of my obligations under Article 15. Any unauthorized occupant constitutes a membership violation. $500 per month per unauthorized occupant until corrected. The board retained the right to refer the matter to the co-op's legal counsel, and a routine courtesy review of the unit was scheduled in 30 days. I put the letter in the green folder. I sat at my kitchen table without turning on the light. Outside, Georgian Bay was doing its late May thing. That hammered pewter color the water goes on, overcast evenings, and the quiet that comes in off the water when the tourist season hasn't quite started. I sat there a long time. I called Craig at 6. I read him 2 sentences from the letter. He said the co-op board wasn't the police. I said the letter had a date and a name and a lawyer on retainer. He said he knew how many co-ops in this province had someone's adult kid or elderly parent in a unit nobody had formally approved and that nobody actually enforced these things. I said I didn't know the answer to that and that it wasn't the question. Then his voice changed, went low and deliberate. "You went to the board to block my parents instead of picking up the phone and saying no. You had to make it official." I told him that on the 11th of March I had said, "Let me look at something," and that on 2 separate occasions afterward I had asked him to sit down with me and Dana and go through things on paper at a table. He had said there was nothing to sit down about. He said, "What are you actually protecting up there, Yvonne? You live alone. You walk around in a 2-story townhouse by yourself." I said I was protecting the conditions under which I had been able to join the co-op in the first place, and that those conditions were not mine to renegotiate on anyone's behalf. Then he said the real thing, the thing that made the shape of the entire spring suddenly clear. "I'm going to say this plainly. In a few years, you're not going to be managing everything yourself the way you do now. And when that time comes, it's Dana who'll be dealing with your affairs. You might want to be thinking about what kind of relationship you want her to have with us when that happens." There it is, out loud on a Wednesday evening in May. He was not worried about which bedroom his mother would sleep in. He was thinking about what happens when I am old, when someone begins making decisions about where I live and what I own, and he wanted the people already inside my unit to be his family so that the natural pull of those decisions would go in one direction. What he still does not understand, what he has never once asked about, is that co-op membership does not pass down. It cannot be assumed or inherited. When I am no longer able to maintain primary residence here, the membership returns to the co-op. Dana cannot take it over by living in the unit or being named anywhere in my paperwork. There is nothing to transfer. His parents in the yellow room would not have changed that. It would only have put me in violation and handed the board grounds to end my membership early, which is the one outcome that would have left me with nothing. I said the 9 words I was going to say that night. Then my answer has to stay no for now. And I hung up on my son-in-law, which I had never done in 11 years. I asked Dana to come up on Sunday. She arrived at 2 and took her coat off when she came in, which told me she was planning to stay until we'd said the things that needed saying. I put the membership agreement on the table. I told her what I had bought in 2006 and what it had cost and what it was not. I told her the maximum share price I could sell the membership for. It is pegged to a formula in the bylaws, and that there is no windfall in this house, no inheritance, no asset that moves from my name to anyone else's. There is only residence, mine for as long as I live here and meet the conditions. She sat with that. Then she said, "Craig thinks it's like any other house. He thinks if something happened to you, we would just take over the unit." I told her the membership agreement was in the green folder and that she was welcome to take it home and read the whole thing. She said he was going to be angry. Not, "I'm sorry, Mom." Not, "I should have explained all of this 2 years ago." Her first complete thought was about the temperature of her husband's feelings. If you have ever managed your family's emotional weather instead of telling your family the truth, you already know exactly what that habit costs over time. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. I need to tell you something about myself before I finish, because it belongs in this story. For 22 years, I handed people documents instead of conversations. When Dana was 17 and wanted to leave school early to work full-time, I did not sit down with her. I printed 3 articles about wage gaps over a lifetime and left them on her bed with a sticky note that said, "Read these first." She read them. She stayed in school. She has never quite forgiven me for being right by handout. I taught my daughter that hard information arrives in a folder and that you keep your mouth shut after you deliver it. Then I was surprised when she folded her own hard information and kept it in a drawer for 2.5 years. She deserved better than a mother who argues by paperwork. That is the part of this story I am still working on. Earl and Margo came to see the house on the first Saturday in June without calling ahead. Earl drove, Margo in the passenger seat with a Tim's bag on her lap. They walked through the rooms the way people walk through a place that already belongs to them in their minds. Margo stood in the doorway of the yellow room, looked at the lamp on the nightstand, and said, "This is the one I want. Earl can have the one at the end for the TV." They already had names for the rooms. They had been naming them for a while. Earl went to the backyard without asking. I heard him out there. When he came back in, he told me I had about 40 feet to work with along the fence line, enough for a raised bed if I ever wanted one. He'd need to clear the corner. The cedar hedge I planted when Dana still drove up most weekends. I asked if he would wait for the board's answer before anyone made plans for the yard. He said, Sure. The way you agree to something you've already decided doesn't apply to you." They stayed an hour. At the door, Margo patted my arm and said they were looking forward to the company. That was the kindest thing she said all spring, and I believe she meant it. I watched the Silverado back out of the driveway and went inside and sat with the denial letter, which had been in the green folder for 11 days by then. The board's courtesy review happened on a Thursday in late June. 2 board members, polite, doing exactly what they were there to do. Dana was in my hallway. She came close and said quietly so the board members wouldn't hear, "Just say they've been visiting." 37 years old. My daughter asking me in my own hallway to make a false statement on a document the co-op has on file. I said 5 words to her. I signed the statement in October. She stepped back the way you step back when someone puts a hand gently out. The board noted that the member had self-referred the proposed change 30 days prior to any occupancy, that no violation had occurred, and closed the review file. Earl and Margo found a 1-bedroom above a laundromat in Barrie. $1,100 a month. Craig makes up the difference between their CPP and OAS and the rent. That is a bill he will be paying for years, and it exists because he sold a trailer on the confidence of a room he never once asked to read the terms of. He has not spoken to me since. Dana says he tells it as a story about a housing bureaucracy that doesn't understand what family means. I've decided that is a version he's allowed to carry. Dana didn't call for 6 weeks. She has called me every Sunday at 6 for 4 years. For 6 Sundays in a row, my phone was quiet. Then she came up on a Tuesday in July, unannounced, let herself in with her key, and sat across from me at this table. She picked up the tape measure I'd left sitting out and turned it in her hands, end over end. "I should have explained the co-op rules to Craig a long time ago," she said. I told her that was true. I also told her the thing I am not good at saying, that for 22 years I put paper between myself and hard conversations, and I had passed that habit to her without meaning to, and she had paid for it differently than I had, and I was sorry for the part that was mine. She cried a little. I put my hand flat on the table between us and left it there. I did not hand her anything. Here is where things stand now. The yellow room is clean and made up, and it belongs to Dana when she wants it. She knocks. She always has. That is a thing about her I have never had to ask for. Craig does not come into this house. If that changes, it starts with him reading the membership agreement from the first page at an actual table with actual coffee. Dana says that is fair. The $40 lamp is still on the nightstand. I bought it for a woman who was measuring my fence line and naming my rooms before the board had said a single word. I have thought about moving it to another room. I keep not doing it. It turns on and it works, and from the hallway, when I walk past the open door, I can see it on the nightstand in the early morning light, and it tells me something I need to be able to see. I was not trying to keep anyone out. I was trying to get the answer right. I prepared for yes. The answer was no. Both of those things can be true about the same person at the same time, and I would rather know that about myself than almost anything else this spring taught me. Nobody moves into a life you built by standing in the rooms and assuming the title transfers through walls. The only thing that protected me was a form I helped write 20 years ago, and the habit, learned at a law firm's desk over 2 decades, of knowing where I had filed it. Go read your own documents this week, your co-op agreement, your condo declaration, your lease, whatever you signed and put in a drawer. Read every page. Then come tell me in the comments what you found. Subscribe if you want to hear what came after, and I'll see you in the next one.